My name is Tanya and I'm an autistic disability rights activist. There are two things that I've learned over all the years which stand out for me more than anything else that can help autistic people and the people who care about them. Number one, communication is a human right, and it should be a priority for everything that we do. Number two, listen to as many autistic people as possible. Without number one, number two won't be possible, because there'll be a whole lot of people, maybe a quarter, maybe a third of autistic people who are not going to get hurt if we don't do that. So what does it mean? What have I learned from these two principles? Well, let me go into an example. I'm in a WhatsApp group which is for autistic people in Africa, and I've got friends from Kenya who are in there. We've just recently had a Nigerian guy who's been added. There's some people from other countries, and occasionally we might also add a therapist or a parent, although it's actually for autistic people themselves. We had a parent added from a town in Malawi. The town has about 100,000 residents, and she wasn't getting any help for her non-speaking autistic son who cries all the time. The school asked her to come in and to explain how to deal with his behavior. When she described some of the things he was doing, I said it's going to be pretty useless coming to tell the school anything about his behavior until you deal with the intense pain that he is in. And I could tell that he was in pain by what she described about his actions, because I've suffered from the same pain. So by listening to as many autistic people as possible, a few years ago, a friend had taught me what to do about sensory pain. We learned that for probably the majority of autistic people, it's certainly a high percentage, the problem is with sensory overstimulation coming from intracellular hypokalemia, which means a shortage of potassium. And this can happen as a result of a number of factors, some of them genetic, epigenetic, and they can be exacerbated, in other words, made worse, if you don't have enough magnesium in your body, which is the gatekeeper for the potassium in your cells. So based on what this mother was telling me, her son is constipated, her son struggles to sleep, he seems to be severely anxious, he responds in a very jumpy way to any kind of touch, sound, and so on. I suggested to her very carefully to go to the pharmacy and to try giving him some magnesium and some potassium, and I explained how to take it as well, because you can take risks with things like this. Anyway, she didn't have enough money to afford both, so she just got the magnesium. Within 3 weeks, he was able to go back to school. He didn't have the constipation anymore. He wasn't constantly crying whenever he needed to go to the toilet. He wasn't crying in the classroom. He was sleeping better. He was able to gesture more to explain what he needed. And she added, oh, and by the way, something I forgot to tell you was that his incontinence, he'd been in nappies, was also resolved, something which I didn't expect. I wouldn't have known this. I wouldn't have known to tell her this if I'd just been listening to autism experts, because they don't tell you these things. They're trying to deal with behavior. They're trying to deal with research on your genes and things that they think are fun for them. Now let's talk about the other principle. Communication is a human right. So I was involved in bringing Spelling to Communicate to South Africa. I was one of the 3 people who brought that method of communication to South Africa. And something that I've learned from spellers, from non-speakers in general as well, non-speaking autistic people, it came up when I was preparing for the 2018 Autistic Health Seminar, which was the first first health seminar ever to have all autistic speakers, which I arranged with friends, and we got a neuroscientist who was autistic as well to come and speak. I also discovered at that talk that the average doctor doesn't recognize a magnesium deficiency. They don't know the symptoms, which is scary, but shows you we need to do some education there. Anyway, I wanted the voices of non-speaking autistic people heard, so I asked some non-speakers to tell me what they would like to have doctors, therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, what they would like those people to know about people like them. Well, there was one particular non-speaker by the name of Deepak who took 2 sessions to communicate a single line. And this particular line which he said, and it took him 2 sessions because he was crying during this first session, second session, trying to get through his words. But the words that he said are so common to what non-speakers say. They're often some of the first things that non-speakers say. He said, and you might have expected that he would have said, wow, I have a great disability. Can somebody please research how to deal with this disability, how to get my body to move better, how to whatever. Isn't what he said, and it isn't what most non-speakers say. He said they must not treat me like a small child. And that is what guidance we should all take when dealing with autistic people and with non-speakers. Because when you start speaking in a normal tone of voice, knowing that you're speaking to somebody who can understand, your whole body language changes. Your whole assumptions and presumptions change. You start behaving like a person who respects another person. Now, the non-speaker in your life may be jumping around, may be hitting themselves, may be doing all these things. Stop treating them like a small child. If these 2 principles, the principles of respect, of listening to as many autistic people as possible, and bearing in mind that communication is a human right, if those 2 principles are carried through into schools, to parents, to therapists, to government, to all the people whose decisions have an influence on autistic people, if those 2 principles are carried through, we can change what we need to change for autistic people and for their families.